that I won't say it gets old, but the message is unceasingly, without variation. It is sin brings destruction upon any people. Sin brings destruction upon God's people. Sin is a horrible influence in the life of people. You cannot read this book and not understand how important it is that we serve our God in the direction that God has given us to go. Here we are, chapter 20, verse 1. It came to pass in the 7th year, in the 5th day in the 10th month of the month, 10th day of the month, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Jehovah and sat before me. So here you have the wise men in the captivity. So they're gathered around Ezekiel. Been 11 months now, and there's been no outpouring of the prophet's message. And so maybe they're getting a little antsy. I don't know. Maybe they're saying, what's happened to Ezekiel? He's not running off at the mouth like he always has. What's happened to him, see? They don't like him. So, I can speak that way from them. They don't like him. They don't like being told every time they meet that they're wrong, they're sinners, and they brought this on themselves. They don't like that. But it's been 11 months now. So they come before Ezekiel, and the Bible says, and the word of Jehovah came to me saying, so God's heading this off. Came to me saying, Son of man, speak unto the elders of Israel, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah. So here's the covenant keeping, the memorial name of the God of Israel. Here's the burning bush God. It is to inquire of me that you've come. I mean, why are you here? They are challenging God. As I live, here God swears another oath. As I live, saith the Lord Jehovah, I will not be inquired of by you. God does not stand scrutiny by us. Remember reading the book of Job? And Job finally put his hand on his mouth and shut up. You see, the point here is they have no right to inquire of God, to challenge his counsel. That's what they do. And so he with an oath he says, I will not be inquired of by you. Wilt thou judge them, son of man? Wilt thou judge them? So he's calling on the prophet here to be the objective listener. Cause them to know the abominations of their fathers, and say unto them, all right, here's the sermon. So he said, cause them to know this. And so you remember the Apostle Paul says, I didn't shrink back from declaring to you the whole counsel of God. So God says to Jeremiah, you're going to be what a judge is supposed to be. He's supposed to be the one that listens without bias in any direction. Isn't that right? Now, that's not the case, but originally designed by the forefathers, that was the case, but that's generally not so. You really have to have a good, strong case anymore for innocence to get a unbiased viewpoint from the judge in which in the world we live in today. You get a ticket, you get arrested, you're automatically assumed guilty. The judge is, he's going to throw everything he get. It has to do with money primarily into the coffers, but it's hard to find someone that comes into the court without an opinion one way or the other. So he says, is it to inquire of me? So there's the basis. Cause them to know the abominations of their fathers. All right, here comes the history lesson. First point is, I chose you. You are here by election. You're the hand-picked child. You line up all of the people on the earth, and I picked you. I picked you. Special privilege. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah. Here's the one at the burning bush God. in the day when I chose Israel. God could have chosen anyone else. Remember what John the Baptizer said, of these rocks God could raise up seed unto the Abraham. I mean, God could have done it any way he chose, but he chose Israel. And sware unto the seed of the house of Jacob, and made himself known unto them in the land of Egypt, when I swear unto them, saying, I am Jehovah your God. That's the memorial name of the covenant keeper God that met Moses in the bush, the burning bush. This, I am Jehovah your God. In the day I swear unto them to bring them out of the land of Egypt into a land that I had searched out for them. Here's God's providence, a land flowing with milk and honey. In that fertile crescent of the world then and even today, that the Jordan Valley, that part of the world from Lebanon and on all the way down to the Wadi Del Arish, the southern border of Israel, that was mountainous, watered, irrigated, pasture land, farmland. It was the plum of that part of the world, because the rest of it over there is just sand. And it's countless. Clarence, that foster boy of ours, was flying on a mission out of Iraq, and he said he flew across that part of the wilderness wandering area the Bible talks about, and he said he was amazed at how that country is made. And he said it seemed like, there'd be a little oasis and a water hole here, and right at the edge of the horizon flying, there'd be kind of another one. And then you'd pass that one, there'd be kind of another one, and you'd pass that. And I said, well, Clarence, I said, what was in between those? And he said, blasted rock, sun-blasted, sand-blasted rock, and desert, scrub bushes. And I guess it kind of describes what's kind of down south of Midland toward Andrews. You know what I mean? I mean, there's not anything there. So God chose by his providence. He chose, look at this, I searched out the land flowing with milk and honey. Now, you know, milk and honey is a euphemism, a metaphor. It's a figure of speech for a wonderful place. All right? And so here's what he did. So, number one, he chose the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Number two, he chose the perfect place for them. He's setting up the logic here, and I want you to see that. These people have come, and they're challenging God. Why we're here in Babylon, why aren't we home and all this, and God, he hadn't been straight with us, and et cetera, et cetera. And he's going to show them exactly why they are where they are. And so he starts off with a history lesson. You are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, aren't you? Yeah, the 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob. They all went down, to the land of Goshen, and Pharaoh protected them because of Joseph. And there they grew to a nation when they came. They stayed there 430 years. They came out of there, a nation that carried 600,000 fighting men that carried the sword, not counting the women and children and the old duffers like me. We're talking about the fighting men, 600,000 strong. That's a pretty sizable nation. And so he says, which is the glory of all the lands. In that part of the world, my goodness. And I said unto them, cast ye away every man the abomination of his eyes, and defile not yourself with the idols of Egypt. Remember the 10 plagues? Every one of the plagues was a war of God against an idol in Egypt. Every one of those plagues. All right? And the war against livestock. Remember, they had the mange and all kind of things, and the Apis, the bulls, the great god of Egypt at that time. Well, the children of Israel in the wilderness, Moses go up on the mountain to get the law, and what did they build? Yeah, the golden bullock or Apis. That's the god of Egypt. One of them, the 10 plagues will remind you of the different gods. They even worshiped a bug, a bug. God sent a plague, and it was bugs that crawl all over them. They even worshipped a frog, and they'd get in their sleeping bags at night, and something would jump around and say, yeah, I'm not alone, Unzip the bag and get out, and there was frogs everywhere. Imagine you're beating your sourdough bread and getting it all ready to go in the oven, and hey, there's a lump right there. Wait a minute, the lump's moving. And you open the bread, and there's a frog. They're just everywhere. And that was against the god Hek, the god Hek, or Hector. So God has cleansed them of the idols when he brought them out of Egypt, he says right here. Cast away the men, the abomination of his eyes, and defile not yourself with the idols of Egypt. I am Jehovah your God. But they rebelled against me, and they would not hearken to me, and they did not cast away the abomination of the eyes, neither did they forsake the idols of Egypt. There's a history right there. You already know, we already talked about the golden calf. Then I said I would pour out my wrath upon them, God's judgment, to accomplish my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. Yeah, those plagues came on the whole land of Egypt to make believers out of not only the Egyptians, but the people of God. Yeah. Then the last few were stayed from the land of Goshen, especially the death angel, because of the blood on the mantelpost. He said, I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations among which they were, in whose sight I made myself known to them, in bringing them forth out of the land of Egypt. So I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my statutes, and I showed them my ordinances, which if a man do, he shall live. See that? God showed them, here's the roadmap, now stay with it. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Jehovah that sanctified them. And so he gave them a special day every week to the children of Israel. That in that day, as I made the sea and the land and all things therein in them in 6 days, and rested the seventh, so also thou, Israel, do all thy work in 6 days, and on the seventh thou shalt rest also. And that's the book of Exodus, chapter 20. And he wasn't talking about 1,000-year days that some people like to let evolution sneak in the corner and say, well, the days, you don't know those were literal days. Yes, I do. Because I stand with Moses. He's the one that wrote it. God inspired Moses to give us the books of the law, the Pentateuch. And Moses says, here's the way it was. Moses said, in 6 days the Lord God made heaven and earth and all that in them is, and on the seventh day rested. And here's the parallel. Now you work 6 days and then you rest one. Because I worked 6 days and I rested one. Now you worked 6 days and rested one. God didn't say, well, I worked 1,000 years one day and 10,000 years the next day and one day the next year. Now, oh, Israel, you do that too. Well, that's baloney. So God gave them the Sabbath. No other nation in the world. No other nation in the world could take the day off and serve God. Our founding fathers in this country established what came to be called blue laws. Matter of fact, I've seen petitions now in the magazines that I get, hunting, fishing, field and stream and all that. They are states in the Northeast that are petitioning for the game and fish up there to allow them to hunt on Sundays, because they were so, that early founding fathers in the colonial times, they still carried with them the idea that we're going to give God a day out of our week. And so the first day of the week, Sunday, the Lord's Day, and what we said was, this is the Lord's Day, the businesses are not going to be open, and nothing else is going to be going on. It's an opportunity for you to remember the Lord God. In other nations, I've been in other countries, they don't take off. We have here an expression called what? The weekend. The weekend. They don't have that. They don't have a weekend. They just work. They just go right on around. There's no special day they take off or do nothing unless there's some kind of national holiday in that country. They don't have a weekend like we do. They don't have. What brought the weekend? You see, two things. The setup of the founding fathers for this principle right here, and organized labor. You work 5 days, you get a day for yourself and a day for the Lord. The weekend. That's what we have in our tradition. We're off on the weekend. And our weekends have become play days rather than giving the Lord the day. Now look, here's what he said. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did. They violated the Sabbath day. There's twice you can find that in the book of Leviticus. They walked not in my statutes. No, they didn't do what he said. They rejected my ordinances. They didn't follow God's law. Which if a man keep, he shall live in them, and my Sabbaths they greatly profane. Then I said I would pour out my wrath upon them. These are people that come out of building bricks, and Pharaoh grinding them down to nothing. It was, 7 14-hour days a week and no stop. It just run and run and run. And God said, I'm going to give you a day to rest and reflect on my goodness. And what they do? Some of them, they couldn't get out of the cycle. And they violated the Sabbath. Then I said I would pour out my wrath upon them to consume them. But I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I brought them out. So God said, because of my name and because of the people would say, well, that their God is not really God. He couldn't really do it anyway. And so God said, because of that, I would not profane my name. He put up with them. He put up with them. Moreover, I also swear unto them in the wilderness, I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands, because they rejected my ordinances and walked not in my statutes, profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. They never broke from idols they had grown up with in Egypt. That whole generation never saw the land that flowed with milk and honey except two, and that was Joshua and Caleb. Moses didn't even get to see it. That whole generation died. This is a history lesson. This is what Ezekiel's bringing. And he said, and nevertheless mine eye spared them, and I destroyed them not, neither did I make a full end of them in the wilderness. So he didn't make a full end, but he made an end to those, that generation. They all died in the wilderness. And I said unto their children, the ones that the second generation, walk not in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their ordinances, nor defile yourself with their idols. I am Jehovah your God. Walk in my statutes and keep mine ordinances and do them. So second time around, second generation, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me is what he says. I am Jehovah your God. So stay with me. Hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am Jehovah your God. So he gives them a sign. The Sabbath day is a day that you will honor, and it'll be a token of the covenant we're making. Remember in the destruction of Jerusalem story, the Lord said, pray that it won't be on the Sabbath day. Why? Because on the Sabbath day, the gates of the city are locked, and all commerce is shut down. There's no coming in or going out. No coming in or going out. So don't do it, he says. But the children rebelled against me. Oh, no. You mean the second generation? Yeah. They walked not in my statutes, neither kept my ordinance to do them, which if a man do, he shall live. Now, God keeps saying that. If you do what I ask you to do, you will live. Then I said, I will pour out my wrath upon them, second generation wrath, to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. Nevertheless, I withdrew my hand. So Moses pled for him, remember? And wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I brought them forth. Moreover, I swear unto them in the wilderness, I had scattered them among the nations and dispersed them through the countries. Now that's Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30. That's where in the wilderness he gave them the blessings of cursing, of goodness, of the covenants of blessing and cursing. And we don't have time to read Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30, but that's the two covenants. The covenant of blessing and the covenant of cursing. So he said in the wilderness, and he's given, this is a history lesson, remember? These people should already know this. Because they had not executed my ordinances, but rejected my statutes, profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their father's idols. I'm telling you, what dad does impacts a kid. It does. It just does. You know, the generation I grew up in the part of the world that Judy and I grew up in, everybody smoked. Everybody chewed, everybody dipped. My grandmother used to have to take out a snuff can, chew on a twig, get it wet, put it in that snuff can, roll it around, stick it back in her lip, you know. And that was Garrett's Sweet Snuff. Yeah. And my granddad chewed different kinds of tobacco. And I'm telling you what, when he stopped and spit in the fireplace, my grandmother would take the hide off of him, because she'd use those ashes to make soap. And she did what, just like the cleaning lady asked me. The cleaning lady that cleaned this building said, Mr. Crowley, she said, I've got a favor to ask. And I said, what is it? She said, would you tell your men, and I think it's just the men. And I said, okay, if it's just the men, what are you going to say? Would you tell him to quit spitting in the waste paper basket in the bathroom? I shouldn't have to say that, should I? I shouldn't have to say in a church building, don't chew skull or grizzly bear or hide of the bear or whatever it is that you dip, chew, and then go back here during the break and spit in the can. Would you like to clean those trash cans out when somebody been spitting skull or hair of the bear in them? You know, would you like to do that? I don't blame her a bit. If it was me, I'd pick the thing up and throw it in the dumpster and go buy a new one and charge the church for it. That's what I'd do with it. I wouldn't clean the nasty thing. The fathers learn from the kids. I mean, the kids learn from daddy, don't they? Yeah. You know, daddy uses stuff and the kids use the stuff. And they both learn to spit in the waste paper baskets and in the sink and all that. They all learn to do that. And you shouldn't have to tell people in the church building, don't spit the leavings of snuff in a waste paper basket in the men's room or in the sink, for heaven's sakes. Shouldn't have to do that. But the kids learn from daddy, don't they? Because they had not executed my ordinance, but had rejected my statutes, and had profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after their father's idols. Moreover also I gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances wherein they should not live. And I polluted them in their own gifts. No, God gave them these things. This is what they wanted. You know, sometimes God will give us what we want instead of what we need. And that's exactly what he does here. That's what 25 and 6 are all about. It may be a little difficult to understand, but what he says is, I gave them up to their own desires. I let them have what they wanted to have. I wanted to have. What were they doing? Instead of giving the firstborn child to God, you remember they had to appear at the temple on that 8th day, and they had to bring that child before God, the first that burst forth from the womb, and they had to dedicate, just like Jesus was brought by Mary and Joseph to the temple. The firstborn son was brought before God. Now, what are they doing? They're taking the firstborn son and they're giving it to the fire god Moloch instead of Jehovah God. And in this case, the child dies in the fire god Moloch. It's offered in the fire. Human sacrifice to fire. You know, fire is a fascinating thing. It is. And fire is a tremendous power. It is. And the ancients saw a tremendous power and a certain mystic quality to fire. And you know, if you've ever been out in your life and you've been sitting around a campfire, everybody stares into the fire, and they, you know, and a lot of times we go to camps and Christian camps or whatever, and we have a fire. You know, football teams, we build a bonfire. There's a certain mystic quality about fire, and we like to use it in certain things. In certain things. And you learn through military practice and other things. You don't build a fire and sit around looking in it, because if you have to look in the darkness, where are you at? You're blind. So you don't stare into a fire. Not if you're in a situation other than just out roasting wieners and burning marshmallows. So here they have been caught up in the mystic of fire. And so they worship fire. And that just kind of, you know, like I said, I remember A&M, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, they built such a stack of logs down there that they fell and killed a bunch of kids. Killed a bunch of kids. Why build a fire like that? Why build a bonfire? And then what's the draw to it? You know, we used to cut wood when I was a kid. We had a fireplace at the end of the house and had a wood cook stove. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm not really enamored by fire, because I used to have to feed them things. In a fireplace at each end of the house was warm. It was cold in the middle. And you had to feed them things constantly. And I grew up like that. And I remember when we finally got electricity and we got an electric cook stove, and I rejoiced with my mother. I was about 14, and I didn't have to cut wood for that cook stove anymore. So fire doesn't, you know, I'm not really excited about it. So you won't see me at a bonfire or something like that. It holds no fascination for me. Now look at this, 27. All right, God, 25 and 6, God said, I'll let you do I gave them over to it. I'll let you have it. I'll let you do all that stupid, because that's what you wanted to do. I'll let you do it. Therefore, Son of Man, verse 27, unto the house of Israel, say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, in this, moreover, your fathers blasphemed me, in they had committed trespass against me, for when I had brought them into the land which I swear to give unto them, then they saw every high hill and every thick tree. Here what they do, go up on the highest hill, and what they do? Built a place of worship upon the high hill. And every real majestic tree, they cut the thing down and made idols out of them, wooden idols. I showed y'all years ago my idol. I have Kon-Tiki. You can go to the library and check out the book about Kon-Tiki. Carol, what's the name of that author of that book? Thakendall? Huh? Thor Heyerdahl. All right, he wrote a book, Kon-Tiki, about the wood and the balsa and everything that, they think populated Tahiti and all of the islands over there. And he has a picture of Kon-Tiki, the god of wood, balsa wood, the god of wood. And I have one of them little things, And I used to carry that and show it. And then one day it disappeared. And then when it came back, it had a gold tooth in it. One of my friends, and the elder in the church in Garden City, Kansas, took the thing home, and he was a whittler, a carver, and all that, and he carved a silly smile on his face and put a gold tooth in it. So when I hold it up now, it looks amazing. And it's packed right now because we moved my office, but it's packed. But I'd show you that God. Then I have another one from the Philippines, made out of mahogany. And it is the face of their God. Yeah. Not only have I been places where they worshiped idols and have seen the participants in the idol worship, I have smelled their incense, I've seen their little God figures, and because I have a foundation in Christ, because I was raised by a godly gospel preacher and mother, they were no gods to me. There's something that I could just kind of grin and say, you know, that little paper doll figure in that little house with that little pagoda with that incense burning, you know, that's not going to save anybody. Alan Bingham and I used to talk about that. We used to talk about those little pagoda houses and all of that incense and stuff, because he and I shared the same time frame in Southeast Asia. And we learned the idols that control those people's lives. They worship elephants. They worship elephants. Elephants are not gods. I spent some money in order to tape, and it shows a special adventure in the life of Fred Bear, you know, the great bow guy in America, because I'm interested in archery, and I'm an archery nut, actually, but anyway, a special bow was built for him and a special arrow, and he killed that elephant with an arrow. And they found it, you know, 100 yards or so down a trail, and there it laid, you know, and it was dead. And so the tribesmen all come in, start cutting it up, and they were going to eat it. Let me tell you something. You can't kill our God with an arrow. You can't do it. You can't kill the God we serve with an arrow. Can't do it. Worship an elephant, something that you have the power over. You know, you have the power over it. Worship snakes, you know, this metal medic thing that sticks on the collar that the medics wear in the armed services, you know, and I forgot the name of that thing, but it's snakes wrapped around. You want to worship snakes? I don't think I do. I know too much about snakes. Now, look at this. Yeah, every high hill and every thick tree, they offered their sacrifices, and there they presented the provocation. See, this is provocative toward God. You get the word? This is provocative toward God. And there also they made their sweet savor, they burning incense, they poured out their drink offerings. Then I said unto them, what meaneth the high place whereunto you go? What meaneth the high place? Well, Lord, what time you got? I think this clock up here is wrong. Got too many people standing in the foyer. Okay, we're out of time. We'll take it up later. Mark it right there. What meaneth the high place whereunto you go? You know, why are you going up on the mountain? If you're interested in serving God, what are you doing on the mountain serving the idol?